Hi everybody, welcome to today's webinar. Today we are going to be talking about work experience and how to make a really good work experience program. We've got a great selection of panelists today. I'll introduce you to very shortly. Just a reminder about our webinars and how they work in case you haven't joined one of them before. We will be recording the session, and that session will go online afterwards. We'll send you a link, and that's a great opportunity for you to go back and revisit things that you missed. You might want to take some more notes or something, but also please do share it amongst your teams, because we're always very keen to get our learning spread as widely as possible. Actually, as we've all got very busy diaries at the moment, we're finding actually that our webinars get sort of like triple, quadruple attendance afterwards. So please do make use of that. We like the sessions to be as interactive as possible. So please do use the question box actually within the platform that we use, the GoToWebinar platform. I will keep an eye on those as we go through the sessions and pose any questions to the audience as we go through. We've also got some time at the end. We've got about 10 minutes at the end where we'll have some time for those. But we will make sure that we finish for 1:30, because conscious that everybody either needs to go and grab a bit of lunch before the next Zoom call or needs to jump straight onto the next Zoom call. So yeah, we will make sure we finish on time. So let's do some introductions first of all. So my name is Steve Isherwood. I'm Chief Executive of the ISE, and I will be acting as host for today's webinar. But of course, it's our contributors that you really want to hear from. They're the experts with the expert knowledge. So Marie, would you like to introduce yourself first of all?
Thanks, Stephen. Yeah, Marie Jobson from the Careers and Enterprise Company. We work primarily to support careers leaders in strategic planning and developing progressive programs to support young people to identify their best next steps. So primary stakeholder is careers leaders, and really delighted to be with you all today.
Fantastic. And then Juliet from Fujitsu. Would you like to say hello, Juliet, and introduce yourself?
Yeah, good afternoon, everybody. As Steve said, yeah, Juliet Silvester. I'm head of responsible business for Fujitsu across Northwestern Europe, which includes the UK. And we're an IT organisation. So we have many different jobs that go across different areas, not just all IT by any means. And we've made some quite significant progress with what we do around work experience over the last year or so. So that's why I'm here today. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Fantastic, thanks Juliet. And Asha, would you like to say hello?
Yeah, absolutely. Hello everyone, my name is Asha Jagatia and I am speaking from Vodafone UK. So my job is to lead the work experience and apprentice programme across the UK. I'm here to talk to you about the amazing transformation of our work experience programs, particularly across the last year and a half. So very excited to share our insight with you and discuss that with you today.
Great, thanks Asha. And Jon.
Yes, good afternoon everybody. My name's Jon Mallott. I head up our employer and public sector partnerships here at Springpod. We're working with an increasing number of enterprise employers and doing lots of great work with those, as well as in the NHS. And I'll give you some insights into what we're doing later on in the presentation. So nice to see you all.
Fantastic, thanks Jon. And just a quick outline of the rough agenda that we'll be following. First of all, we're going to hear from Marie. Who's going to be talking to us about the benchmarks, GASP 6 benchmark. Then we'll go into a panel discussion. And then we'll have some top tips from Jon on a work experience program. And then, as I said earlier, we will wrap it up with some Q&A at the end. So don't forget to keep popping those Q&As into the question box. So let's crack on with the content. Let me just share my screen because I'm going to drive the slides for Marie. Marie, over to you. Would you like to take it over from here?
Brilliant, thank you. It's been really interesting kind of preparing for this workshop and this seminar, and just thinking more widely about benchmark 6, or as it's known in the real world, experiences of the workplace. When kind of engaging with people, I've been really struck by how emotive this topic is. There's a lot to get our teeth into. So to set the scene, I really want us to delve into our memory bank and try and reflect on or identify in your mind a successful experience of the workplace that you had as a young person. And as you're reflecting, kind of really think about what was it that contributed to making it successful? How was it a successful learning experience? And please do use the chat if you're keen to share any reflections or particular insights. But as I say, what I'm really struck by is that it's quite emotive. Thanks, Steve. So the key aims for this session are really to explore a meaningful and innovative approach to planning for impact when thinking about experiences of the workplace. So what we will look at is design implementation of meaningful experiences that can be aligned to strategic priorities for schools and colleges, how they can really sit within the fabric of schools and colleges and not just seem like a bolt-on, and really thinking about how they can be structured deliberately to support positive student outcomes within a progressive careers programme. So we will think about quite different approaches to experiences of the workplace and then consider the impact that it can have. So there is a resource that accompanies this session. There's a resource for careers leaders that we've put out, Make It Work, and please do have a look at that on our resource directory. I'll share the link with slides. So it would be disingenuous to say that this opportunity to look differently at Benchmark 6 is not linked to the pandemic, because obviously the pandemic really forced us to look differently at everything. However, I want to really take our thinking today deeper than is experience of the workplace better virtually or is it better in person? It's deeper than that. And I really want to push into actually what makes it meaningful. So on the screen at the moment, we've got kind of different ways of thinking about experience of the workplace. It could be a work visit, it could be work shadowing, or it could be work experience. And I really want to clarify up front that work experience is not synonymous with experiences of the workplace in terms of our approach and our thinking. So we really, at the Careers and Enterprise Company, we're really thinking about experience of the workplace with a growth mindset, taking the opportunity that the pandemic's kind of forced us to reevaluate everything, and really think about, well, reframe the perception of experience of the workplace. The definition for us in terms of benchmarks, the benchmark has got quite clear expectations for schools and colleges, and that is that by the age of 16, every student should have had at least one experience of the workplace additional to part-time job, and by 18, they should have had a further such experience additional to part-time job. So really crucially, what we're encouraging careers leaders to acknowledge is that that does not mean a week in year 10. So we're really thinking about this quite differently. It might mean that, but it doesn't necessarily, it's not synonymous with that. So if we have a look at the wider aims, there is a sense of when we're supporting careers leaders to think about this, there is potential here to slow down yet speed up with this benchmark. So if we think about the aims of what people want to achieve through an experience of work, what the planned outcomes were, it means that careers leaders can be clear and focused about what activity will actually deliver, how the implementation can deliver those aims, rather than investing quite a lot of time, human resource and risk and cost in an encounter or an experience of the workplace that isn't designed to actually meet specific learning outcomes or aims. So if we move on to the next slide. Careers is complex. If we just skip ahead again, it is complex in terms of what a careers leader needs young people to know, understand, and be able to do by the time they leave their setting. So our mission as an organisation is that we support schools and colleges and employers to work together to help young people identify their best next step. And I love this phrase because it's on the surface, it's quite simple, but actually there's an awful lot there to unpack, as I said, about if a young person is going to identify their best next step. There's a lot for them to know, a lot for them to understand, and a lot for them to be able to do, like within any other scheme of work. So before any thought of what an experience of work might look like, it's really key. We're encouraging careers leaders to think about the aims. Implementation then flows from that initial thinking and focus. And aims for the experience of the workplace at the moment might be shaped by lots of things. It could be key priorities for the school, special school or college, and that might be longer term socioeconomic contexts of the school or college. It might be things linked more specifically to COVID, but also it might be actually driven by trends in destination data, or indeed, you know, a lot of through our network, our schools are really connected through careers hubs and enterprise coordinators to LEPs. So actually the aims might be influenced by the labour market and what's happening there. So lots of things that might set and form an aim. Just in the next slide, I'm going to ask you to kind of pull back your reflection on your contributions, your reflections and your memories of a successful experience of work. Please do kind of use the chat to share what is the point of an experience of the workplace, what aims should exist to make something a successful experience of the workplace. And what's really interesting is when we've done this kind of activity with our network, or indeed with careers leaders, this question is deliberately quite big. It's deliberately quite probing and deliberately quite scary, because in one session we could have people who think very, very passionately. This is what I meant when you delve into this. People are very clear and very personal in what they think the point of experience of the workplace is. And in one session, we counted up 33 different aims that people believed an experience of the workplace should have. And that's why I'm very clear that an experience of the workplace is not synonymous with what could be a very successful placement a week in year 10. A week in year 10 can't meet 33 different aims. It's just not humanly possible. So we've got to really think about what are the aims specific to a particular school or college and a particular cohort. So when you're reflecting around what made your experience of the workplace successful or positive in that first question, possibly what made it successful was the point was very clear. You understood why you were doing it, and it was structured in a way that helped you to meet that aim that you understood, and that it was planned for impact. So I do get the sense that sometimes what we're trying to do is we're trying to do too much in traditional approaches and potentially achieving very little. And that's despite a huge commitment of time and effort on the part of work experience coordinators, careers leaders, etc. And particularly for the more vulnerable, and this has got a really personal resonance. When I worked in a school, I worked in the same school, very challenging school, for 14 years. And I was quite young when I joined the school, and I remember being on the outside. I wasn't involved in careers at all, and I watched the first experience of work. It was a traditional week in year 10 unfold. And I saw the students who didn't get sorted with a placement, or who gave up very quickly in day 1 or day 2, drift back into school. It's kind of, it was very unsettling. It was quite upsetting. It made a big impression on me, because I asked at the end of the week, I said, how many young people actually engaged? And it was 40%. And it really got me thinking, what was the point in that? And what was there for those more vulnerable people who kind of drifted back in or never got sorted in the first place? So it really got me thinking about what was the point of it truly? How connected were the people who organised it to what the point of it was? How committed were they? How committed were we as a school? How committed were the employers to what the actual impact was planned to be, what the point of it was? So how meaningful was that experience? And I was really open in my question. What was the point even for the 40% who managed to sustain a placement? And that was, as I say, that was 15 years ago now. So that experience and those questions to me still seem quite valid. So what can we do about it? We'll move on to something more positive than my bleak memories of a school example. So these we've worked with a number of careers leaders, as I say, to try and categorize and count how many aims they might set for an experience of the workplace, and they were varied. And this table always kind of really makes people sit up and think, oh my goodness, yeah, careers is quite complex, isn't it? Helping young people to identify their best next step isn't as straightforward as we might like it to be. There's a huge scope here articulated in this table about what students might need to know, understand, and be able to do. And this highlighted to me how we cannot miss any opportunity to be intentional in planning and covering these aims. No single experience of work or employer encounter can meet all of these aims. And in fact, careers leaders actually might not need experiences of work to meet all of these aims. This is where the vision and focus on strategic priorities, and crucially, what students in front of staff that year at that time, what do they absolutely need to know, understand, be able to do to continue their learning journey. So we know from experience that things work when they have a clear purpose and focus. And this range of potential aims allows us to hone in on the ones relevant to particular students at particular points. Thank you. So by being laser sharp in aims and focus, it allows us to potentially, as I said before, do less but achieve more. And this is not at all about dumbing down. It's about really, as I say, thinking about what is it they need to know, understand, be able to do, and be steered by that to meet that aim, and not get distracted or overwhelmed by trying to do too much. All the activity, all the implementation is really tight to what young people need to know, understand, be able to do. And that can be informed by what is needed as standard within the Progressive Careers programme. It could be informed by a vision that the careers leader has for careers, or it might be formed by something much more immediate related to the pandemic. It might be much more related to confidence at the moment, you know, understanding how to navigate difficult social situations, how to literally understand workplace expectations, having had young people out of circulation for so long. It might also be informed by student self-assessment, and there is a link in the resource to Future Skills Questionnaire, which helps careers leaders identify gaps about where students believe their knowledge and understanding and ability to be. So if we move on and then think about, once we've really unpicked the aims, what do we do with it? So there is useful guidance in another publication that we've created called the Can Do Guide. And the Can Do Guide articulates, here are some minimum requirements for benchmark 6. We've already given a lot of thought to careers being quite huge and complex, that it needs to be broken down. So that first requirement, learning outcomes are defined. That helps us do just that, helps us to break it down. Curiously, the Gatsby Toolkit highlights 2 learning outcomes for us already around benchmark 6. They articulate that benchmark 6 should help with the exploration of career opportunities, and it should expand student networks. So already, even with those 2 learning outcomes in mind, you can almost start to think about the activity that would help deliver on those. So it might be that a career leader would set other learning outcomes linked to the aims that they've already set. And in the resource, there is a table with suggested learning outcomes that a career leader might cherry pick from. The second requirement of the Can Do Guide specifies that students should meet a range of people from the workplace. And it's crucial to note that meeting a range of people from the workplace might have impact or it might not. It depends on what the focus of that meeting is, and what the purpose of meeting a range of people is from. So that links back to the learning outcomes. That would shape what an interaction with an employee might look like, depending on the learning outcomes and definitely depending on the aims. Another requirement from Can Do means that there is meaningful 2-way interaction between student and employee. So it's not an observation. There is that sense that there is some kind of immersion and actual work completed as well. So the final one is that an employer would set a task or a piece of work. And all of these requirements start to move students from this potential happenstance wonderful opportunity where they may have an epiphany onto more solid ground, where we're actually scaffolding the likelihood of opportunity. So we're scaffolding physical and tangible opportunities deliberately for them to develop particular knowledge and specific knowledge. We're developing and scaffolding opportunities where they would develop specific understanding and specific ability that can be measured, and that does contribute to them identifying their best next step. So if we have a look at an example on the next slide, let's say, for example, this school has an overall vision around raising aspiration. So that links to an aim. That can happen through scaffolding knowledge, understanding, skills and ability. So I've pushed this one deliberately well away from year 10, and I've pushed this example into year 7. So overall aim is raising aspiration. The specific learning outcome is that young people start to understand all their options after year 11, because that can't happen in year 11. That's got to be built up over years to then test an informed decision. So that could include things that they've maybe never heard of before, apprenticeships, T-levels, and that's no mean feat. So, you know, for young people to really get their head around all their options. So that's why it's good to start drip feeding this and introducing it in year 7 to be built on incrementally. So, you know, have a think today about what activity could happen within an experience of the workplace for year 7 young people that could support this overall aim of raising aspiration and could support young people to start to understand all their options. So really kind of get creative in your mind. So have a reflection, what might work. Here's one I made earlier. The next slide has got some thinking around, this is just from my head. If that was the aim, so these ideas for implementation are absolutely specific to that aim of raising aspiration and the outcome set. And they allow for a very clear brief to the employers, and they also allow for a very clear basis for planning for impact that can be measured. So it pushes us beyond this high level aim of having an experience of workplace that was valuable, enjoyable, possibly by happenstance, and it pushes us towards that tangible progress in knowledge, skills and understanding that is incrementally part of a wider careers programme. So the wide aim for these contributes to raising aspiration, but the focus is on helping young year 7 to understand their progression routes. And these activity ideas for an experience of the workplace are specific to that, and they're very much tied to that aim and that planned impact. So moving on, really want to kind of push as we round off this session around, I've mentioned measuring impact and planning for impact quite a lot. This slide does include some suggestions around measuring impact from experiences of work, but I'd be really interested in the Q&A about hearing your reflections or through the chat around how you would measure experience of work. This list is not exhaustive. There are other examples of good practice. So, and we'll think separately about celebrating successes to round off. So, but this question really hones in on how do we help students to see the impact and help the career leader get that whole view of the impact as a measurement to see if aims and outcomes have been met. The next slide really focuses on celebrating success. And this came out as a really strong thread of good practice when we convened careers leaders to develop the thinking and develop the resource that I referenced. Clear aims and outcomes allow students and careers leaders to recognise success much more easily, obviously. And there were some amazing ideas shared by careers leaders about how they could sing from the rooftops, about the specific progress made by students. So it took it down to real granular. So it wasn't like students really enjoyed the week was very valuable, the week was really successful. How was it successful? Why was it successful? What progress was made by a particular student, by a particular cohort as a direct result of that experience of the workplace? So again, I'm really keen to hear through the panel discussion about your experience, how you imagine or how you could celebrate success. And again, this slide has some ideas collated, but the possibilities are endless, and I'm sure you've got more you could suggest. So finally, it's really, really exciting to kind of think about the buzz that can be created from students by you around an experience of the workplace. All the messaging can be focused around the aims, the purpose, the impact of the experience of work to underline the value specifically of the experience on student outcomes and within the context of school, special school priorities. It helps the careers leader put themselves, as I said at the beginning, absolutely in the fabric of what the school or college are trying to do by saying, look how this experience of the workplace contributed to school and college priorities and things that SLT and governors are really focused on. So all of our resources and thinking and support around Benchmark 6 and all of the benchmarks can be found in the resource directory. There's an overview just on the next slide about key resources. Key resource for this session is linked to the Work It guide, the Benchmark 6. We have got introductory modules for careers leaders who are new to post, but also for education leaders and governors to help them start to think in this way about careers. And again, the links for that will be shared. And if you are a careers leader or you work with careers leaders and you haven't already completed the careers leader training, A key element of our resource and support for careers leaders is the funded professionalised careers leader training, and I will share links for that as well. But that's where that we can really get to grips with this different way of thinking about meaningful approaches to Gatsby benchmarks. Thank you.
Sorry, I had myself on mute there. I'd sort of learned better by now after all this time. Thanks, Marie. That was really good, really comprehensive, really comprehensive guide to benchmark 6 and everything about what makes good work experience. I think really sets a good framework for the rest of our conversation. So if we head over to the panel piece now, this is where I'm going to talk to Asha and Juliet. But Marie, please feel free to jump in as well if you've got any points, as with yourself, John. Asha, can I just come to you first of all and just sort of ask this question? You know, fundamentally, I mean, Marie talked about aims, etc., being clear on those. What is it about work experience that is important to your strategy at Vodafone?
Absolutely, Steve. And I'd say we've been on quite the journey across the last year and a half to 2 years. So I wonder whether it's worth giving some background into sort of what we do from a work experience strategy to inform why it's important. So to really sort of start this thinking off, we began work experience lots of years ago. We really kicked off around 2015 in response to the demand from schools. So the CEC touched on the fact that year 10 work experience opportunities or a week-long shadowing to people in offices was really the thing to do. And we absolutely met that demand and would host hundreds of students a year, predominantly in our Newbury offices and also up north in our contact centres, in those sort of in-person experiences for a week. But the shift in thinking really was driven throughout the pandemic. So when the pandemic hit, naturally, as many other employers had to do, we had to pause our programs. And that presented a really nice opportunity to completely rethink why we run work experience. So moving away from just offering experience to meet a demand from schools, away to a position to think, what is the intention behind this? So it really goes back to the points made earlier of identifying the purpose. So for us, it was identifying what's important to our business and what's important to the schools. So we did lots of work with the CEC and also the ISE to understand what is the demand coming from schools right now? What do students need? What do careers leaders need? And how do we sort of fulfill our purpose and our role as a large-scale local employer across both Berkshire, but also London and the UK generally, because we need to serve the communities in which we exist in. And through those conversations, a couple of things were really clear. The first was that students wanted increased opportunities to develop not only the careers awareness of what's available to them, but employability skills. And I think that's what was missing with our previous sort of approach. The second sort of key purpose pillar was around diversity. And it was very stark in our research that students from low social mobility backgrounds and ethnic minority backgrounds were amongst the most underrepresented. So when we were designing our strategy, and to go back to your question, Steve, on why work experience is important, why do we do it? It was really to serve those aims. So number one, to provide and equip skills with the skills, knowledge and confidence to be able to confidently build their future pathways and understand the options out there. And number two was around uplifting the representation of the BAME community, students from low social mobility backgrounds and females in technology and our workforce. And that's not only to fulfill our social contract as an employer and sort of doing good in society, but it's also about work experience being critical to our pipelines. And that's another sort of shift in thinking. So we can talk about this a bit later in terms of how we've operationalized this and the delivery. But the program we've launched has a specific focus on year 12 right now, where we're really nicely able to discuss the options out there and target the narrative around you're at a pivotal point in time where you can decide between university or an apprenticeship, for example, or any other school leaver program. These are the options out there, and these are the options that Vodafone could provide to you. And so by virtue of that, we hope to see sort of later commitment to our own pipelines down the line. So hopefully that answers that question, Steve.
Yeah, it does. Thank you, Asha. So that's a key point, isn't it? It is. You're right. We'll come back to how those relationships might be built, but there's a societal good from doing this, but fundamentally, this is about building talent pipelines for your organisations, I guess.
Absolutely.
Thanks, Asha. Juliet, from your perspective at Fujitsu, the same question really about work experience being important to your strategies. Is it similar to Asha, or are there any differences with Fujitsu?
So yes, I think there are a few. I mean, it's a similar story, but there are definitely some differences. And I think the main one is that in the past, unlike with Vodafone, Fujitsu's experience, or I felt we didn't really have a standard offering in terms of work experience. So it was very much, who do you know? Is there a manager prepared to take a student on for a week or 3 days, whatever it might be, do some work shadowing? But there wasn't very much structure around what that content would be. And so we were really struggling to see, okay, is this actually adding value? However, we also recognize that, we've got an issue, again, like Asha said, with attracting talent into the company, and particularly encouraging young people to take on STEM subjects. And so we have different, I don't know whether you'd call this work experience, but we've run specific girls' days where we bring young girls before they've made their GCSE courses decisions into Fujitsu to have some fun learning to code. They basically learn to code their own robots. They get experience of our digital annealer and how it can solve problems quicker than the human brain, etc. And then they get to hear a little bit about Fujitsu, and they get to have fun. And we've heard a lot of young girls, after they've done the code club, they were all asking for their own robot that they could build for Christmas. So that's positive. We also are, as Asha had said, we've got similar issues in terms of recognizing that we need to support young people who might be disadvantaged either because of social mobility issues or diversity. And just before the pandemic started, we'd finally agreed on a work experience program that we thought we could offer that would add value on a face-to-face basis, with bringing a number of young people into the company at the same time, so they would all experience the same learning that we were going to share with them. So it wasn't necessarily you're just being left with a manager. It was very much, this is a kind of a taught experience where you can learn about different aspects of working in IT. And then COVID happened, and that gave us the thought that actually, well, we can do this differently. And that's when we started working with Springpod, and we've already reached 400 young people this year, and hope to get that up to 800 by the end of the year. And we would never have been able to do that in person. So that's really opened the doors. And the program that we've put together has a number of different modules, all on different aspects of IT and STEM related topics, plus some information about Fujitsu, because obviously we want these young people to consider Fujitsu as a place of work. And then looking forward in terms of evolving, we're hoping perhaps, once these young people have attended the course, to perhaps invite them into a face-to-face day, which is, you've done the work experience, great, come in and meet us and learn more about us in person. So we're just evolving our thinking on how we do this all the time. But we've been overwhelmed at the popularity of the course. So there's definitely a need out there from young people. And both the modules that we've run so far have been massively oversubscribed. So that's our journey.
Great, thanks, Juliet. Jon, just a quick question to you, and is that broadly similar? Obviously, you work with Vodafone and Fujitsu. Is that the same from all your other clients? Is that broadly the same picture?
Yes, yeah, totally. I mean, I think we're now up to about 150,000 young people have accessed our work experience programs on the Springpod platform so far this year. But echoing some of the points from Asha and Juliet, the diversity of those student cohorts have been so encouraging and incredible, really, to see. So we've certainly opened up, you know, with working with employer partners as well as doing our own programs. We've opened up that access for more young people to kind of gain not only the access into those career paths, but develop their employability skills and really start to think about different journeys. And we find that some students might do 3 or 4 different programs in a week because, you know, they want to just take that knowledge in to make those decisions.
That's, compared to my own work experience from when Marie was doing her slides, thinking back, I think I had half a day in the Taunton County Architect's office. That was it, and I've not ended up being an architect, as you can all see. So just coming back to yourselves, Asha, we did. I think you hinted at some of these, but what are sort of the barriers in terms of making an experience program work really well in an organisation? I mean, with all the competing demands that your business must have.
Definitely, and I think this is a good opportunity to highlight the sort of differences in terms of where we were and the barriers we were facing there, and how we really came to overcome those with a virtual work experience program with Springpod, perhaps. So, starting with the sort of previous picture of the in-person shadowing week, a couple of sort of key observations that I noticed when coming into role around this time last year. So the first is that coming into that sort of model, a student is exposed to really one business area, and they're limited in terms of reach and understanding of who Vodafone is and what we aim to do. So, for example, if a student comes in to shadow someone in the HR operations team, for example, their view of business operations and our broader strategy is HR services and operations. And so that was a barrier that we definitely saw. And we thought we need to have a more fluid model that gives students a breadth of experience across our entire business. So that's the first. The second was around reach and geography. Naturally, with an in-person program, you're limited, as Juliet said, to the number of managers available to host students, as well as just general capacity. And then if you think about the geography, you're then limited to where your office sites are. So with our main office and headquarters in Newbury, the majority of our students came from surrounding areas, which doesn't necessarily represent the diversity of the UK. So in terms of how we sort of used all of those challenges as levers almost to feed into our work experience offering now, we really tried to find a solution that combated all of those. So by working with Springpod, we were able to create a model that gave students a full picture view of the business across 12 different functions. So students would work on an Internet of Things smart tech device and really work through that development process end to end, from the point of product concept through to product development, the technological elements of it, like the cybersecurity, the software engineering, through to marketing, business strategy, and then product launch, so marketing and launching in your sort of retail channel. So it's really a full picture of how our business lines operate and how they come together to launch something like a product. We were also able to combat the challenges around numbers, so amazing reach, and we've across 2 cohorts we've managed to work with over 700 students, which is fantastic. with a view to target 1,000 a year. And then from a geographical perspective, we were really able to break down those barriers and offer a solution that anyone across the UK can reach. And John had alluded to this, but in terms of how that impacted our diversity, it was just incredible to see. So we were able to target 6% ethnic minorities, 22% from low social mobility backgrounds, and over 50% female. So huge difference in reach. And that's, I'd say, really what a virtual offering has enabled us to do.
Great, thanks. And Juliet, the same to you. What are are there any particular barriers that you found in terms of making this work across your business?
I have to say, no, it was very, very welcomed. I think the only barrier was, the amount of work that went into setting the different modules up and getting that organised, and then we're relying on people's time to do the live webinars. But now we've done a couple. There are some that they're all recorded, so we are able to run the sessions even with people not available at the moment. Oh, sorry, if they're not available. So that works well. But I think as an organisation, we were ready to do this, and I think it just took a push, which was, come on, let's do it now. And I think the other thing that has helped us is we have a lot of public sector customers, and so social value legislation is massively important in terms of winning bids. Basically, it's worth at least 10% of the weighting in a bid process. And in terms of social value, the fact that we can work with an organisation like Springpod and say, right, we've got a customer in this particular area, can you please target schools in that area? So we are doing something specific for that customer is really valuable to us in terms of providing a good service to our customers as well. And I think the fact that we've had such good feedback from the students that have attended, and it's amazing to see the reports that come back, they get questioned before and afterwards, and the difference in their confidence about IT and talking about do they now understand things better? Would they now consider a job in IT? The shift is huge, and the fact that it has been so successful, I don't think this is anything we plan on stopping anytime soon, to be honest.
That kind of takes me on to very interesting. You said on the bids point. Actually, I was on one of our employer sector calls this morning, and actually totally different conversation, but it came up there how important actually various bits of the work that a recruitment team might do actually are to those some of that public sector work. You've really got to demonstrate that you're making a difference piece.
Yes.
But you brought me on to my my last question, Juliet, which is around actually building those long-term relationships with students and then joining your organisations. How do you go about sort of both trying to create and sustain those relationships?
So I think that's work in progress for us at the moment. I think that's what I talked about earlier at the beginning was the next stage, I think, is for us to consider whether the students that have attended virtually, whether we can use Springpod as a conduit, because we don't hold any data on the students, so we don't know their names or anything like that because of GDPR. But we could use Springpod as a conduit to go back to these students and say, Fujitsu's doing a careers day, or Fujitsu's doing a drop-in day. Would you be interested? And potentially we could do it at a number of our different locations that we've got around the country, and they could just come in and see what it's like if they were ever to go and work in an office. Increasingly unlikely these days. I mean, a building, well, yes. Not in an office role.
I've got a question that's come in the box just about that, but I'll save that till the end, I think. Asha, you talked about those long-term talent pipelines. How is it you go about those long-term relationships? You know, to, I guess ultimately that people do join your organisation at some point in the future.
Yeah, absolutely, and it's definitely a consideration that we had, because as with Juliet, the previous model had no ongoing sort of conversation with those students. So they would come, visit Vodafone, leave, and never hear from us again. And so that was something that we definitely wanted to change. So first, in terms of how we create those relationships in the first instance, it's about creating a model that they want. And so we really made sure that we understood what the sentiment was from students. What did they want to learn about? So making sure that it was perfectly tied to that. So making sure that there was a careers awareness piece throughout, and really helping them understand their options. And then the second was around giving them employability skills. We were hearing loud and clear that that's what they wanted. So making sure that again was embedded in the form of CV workshops, interview skill building sessions, a session on personal branding, etc. So that was about the sort of creation of interest, how we pique their interest in the first instance. And then in sustaining it, it's about the ongoing conversation for us. So we make sure that we have a question in their application form and afterwards in terms of whether they want to continue the conversation with Vodafone and stay in touch and hear about further opportunities. And we have we sort of worked with our legal and privacy teams to make sure that we had the GDPR permissions in place to do so. And for those that do opt in, it's about ongoing engagement and communication. So when we have our opportunities, making sure that they're showcased and that they're the first sort of pocket of people to hear about them.
Thanks. Jon, I'm slightly conscious of time. We've got plenty of time. We built a bit of slippage time into this. So you were going to, we'll come back. Thanks, Asha and Juliet, for those contributions. We will come back at the end because I've got a couple of questions for the wrap up. But Jon, you were going to give us some tips for a successful work experience program, weren't you? So I need to just press a button on my laptop and that will make you the presenter, Jon, because you were going to share some slides.
Yeah, not too many, but
yeah.
But also just to echo kind of some. Thanks, Steve, and just to echo some of those points that Asha and Juliet have raised in terms of what students are telling us that they want to see in the work experience programs. There's like a few key kind of expectations, and that's learning more about the industry so that they can discover if that career path is right for them. Learning more about a variety of roles within the organisation, which Asha touched on, not just, you know, what does HR look like, but, you know, I'm still discovering, I'm exploring, I want to learn more about IT or business or so forth, to help them, I suppose, inform their decisions about their next steps after education, school and college. Those employability skills are also really important for them. And as you can see on the slide in front of you, one of a big kind of part of our analysis and impact pre and post program is to manage, is to review and you know, get insights into students' confidence levels. And as you can see, you know, 99% of students completing our programs, you know, rate their awareness of careers good or excellent after the program. 90% are now more confident about the job in the industry, and we're seeing, you know, this across the board when they've gone on those programs. So we can see from the student side how it's working. So that's really, really encouraging. And in terms of just top tips, which, you know, we've just launched our and published our kind of virtual work experience guide to help employers that are thinking about virtual work experience. They haven't quite kind of achieved it yet, but really it's about understanding and defining those goals from the start. You know, what does success look like? You know, how are you going to measure that success? And also, because we evaluate those programs and we capture that student feedback, you know, that's an ongoing, that evaluation piece is kind of ongoing. So one of the points Juliet made was, you know, that initial time and commitment it takes to build a program, but once that program's built, it then kind of runs. So the hard work is at the start, but then we modify and amend the program based on the student feedback that we get after every program is run. So we can really adapt it and be flexible and listen to the student voice in terms of what they want. Involve your team, you know, be creative, think about different ways that you can engage them, make the experience more interactive. Just to highlight, I mean, we want to push boundaries on that kind of interactive and immersive experience. And one of the programs we've recently run with one of our NHS partners, because as you can imagine, they can't, you know, having young people in hospitals is just not happening. And last week we delivered our first live surgery webinar as part of a cardiology insight event with Newcastle, where hundreds of students were given an immersive theatre experience, seeing a live keyhole heart surgery and being able to ask questions as that was going on. And the reason Newcastle came to us was because those students needed access for their UCAS applications to get to medical school. They needed that experience. So this is kind of just an element of how we're pushing that innovation to work with our partners on immersive and meaningful experiences. And finally, kind of involving your team members from the start is really important. Students are telling us they want to hear from those inspirational figures. We've touched on the STEM side, so, you know, really for females in engineering or females in technology, really getting those kind of trailblazers and inspirational figures to talk to other young females about their journey. Always, you know, hearing from recent apprentices, interns, graduates about their career journeys, and then kind of finally ensuring that how you're going to measure that impact and evaluate it. And here at Springpod, we do a pre and a post student survey. We've got kind of standard questions, but we can also modify and adapt those so that our partners can ask specific questions pre and post event that goes into their ROI and their own kind of senior leadership team impact reports. So those are our top tips, and you know, you can message me for the guide or go to partners@springpod.com to access that. Thank you.
Fantastic. Thanks, John. Just an interesting question from your point of view, the appetite from sort of schools and students, pupils for this, you know, in this pandemic environment we're still in. Are you seeing it's very strong? Is it a challenge to get the careers agenda into schools? I just wondered if you had any reflections on that.
Yeah, so we tend to find that the majority of our programs run during the school holidays, so that students have got more time to obviously complete and engage in those. But what we do is we give them, you know, more time after those school holidays to complete the programs. So schools and colleges have been incredibly supportive, because they can realise that, you know, they can open up and get their students access to programs. And we're now we've just recently built a program for SEND students as well, which is being kind of piloted across the country. It's a program in healthcare where SEND kind of specialists and teaching assistants are helping those students go through a program. So the schools and colleges have been incredibly receptive, and you know, I think from a perspective, we're supporting them with some of those Gatsby benchmarks that we covered at the start.
Thanks. And Marie, just coming back to you, we've been very quiet for a while, so from your perspective, from what you've heard of the conversations from both the employers, what John was just been saying, actually from a school's perspective, is there anything any reflections you've got around actually how employers might think about their engagement with schools, and how this sort of, I guess, ticks the boxes of what schools do need to deliver?
I think first of all, I just want to say I'm kind of so inspired by the stories and journeys that I've heard today. I think the quality of programs and the thought, it's just that alignment, isn't it? I think if an employer comes having done the amount of thinking, preparation, learning by trial and error that we've heard from today, and then kind of really connects with, actually, this is what we need out of it as an employer, where are you at? What do you need out of it as a school? And then John quite rightly has brought in that third dimension of, does the school know what the students want out of it? It's really spending time up front on the collective aims and what the purpose is, and agreeing that that makes something really powerful. But I'm really inspired today. Fantastic examples.
Yes, it is great. It is very inspirational. We've got a few minutes left, and I've got one question that's come in via the platform. I alluded to this just a few minutes ago. So if I can come to Juliet and Asha. I'll come to you first, Juliet. So somebody's asked a question about, are you thinking about evolving these programs to go hybrid for the future, or stay virtual, or go face to face? Is it the right time to have any thoughts on those yet?
So I don't think we've got, okay, depends how you define hybrid. If you define it as you've got some people who are face-to-face and some people who are doing things online, I am not sure how well that would work, because although we have set times where people can join live webinars, we know from the feedback from Jon and Springpod that often they get listened to at a separate time. So it would be quite disjointed, I think. That's not to say that we can bring young people in to hear the live webinars, but at the moment we're not at that stage where we would be ready to bring young people into offices, and it gives us more logistical things that we need to consider, because typically you would have one webinar running. It might be that you could have it recorded and people in different locations come into the office anyway, but sit and watch the recording. It's all possible, but it's not something we've really thought about yet. But if you said, well, define hybrid as it's mostly virtual, but then we're thinking about, can we do something face-to-face for all the students once the virtual work experience is over, and stay connected with Fujitsu, etc., then yes, we're already thinking about that.
Great. And Asha, a final thought from you on what you think about that sort of virtual hybrid or going face to face. If you had any thoughts on that, how that might evolve.
Yeah, and it's a really good question, and certainly one that we've considered in terms of what is the sort of trajectory of this program. So we wanted to put something in place that stood the test of time. And despite the fact that we're coming out of lockdown, re-emerging, going back to the office, I'm in the office today, for example, I still think the virtual work experience program that we've got in place, Innovators, really does work in the model that it's in terms of meeting those aims of breaking geographical borders, really driving diversity, and democratizing access to these opportunities. So would I change the offering as is? No. I would keep the model virtual for those reasons. However, I think in terms of that ongoing engagement, a potential model that could be explored later down the line, once we sort of reimagine the other side of the pandemic, is a follower program that sort of sits after Innovators for those students that are clearly very highly engaged on that program and want to learn more about Vodafone and our program offering. So something that could be sort of a blended approach that happens after they attend the program.
Fantastic, that's great to hear. We are on 1/2 the hour now, so we have that's a convenient time to finish, because we'll finish perfectly on time. Marie, Asha, Juliet, Jon, really thank you very much. Really lots of very rich and interesting content there, lots for us to unpick and people to go back and have a look at. Just a reminder, as I said at the start, we have recorded the webinar. You will get a link through to the webinar. So if you want to go back and replay bits that you missed, please do. If you want to get in touch with anybody, please drop me a note and I can connect you, or anything that you particularly want to follow up on. Also, feel free to share the link. I mean, we're very keen that our learnings do spread out amongst organisations, amongst our members. So don't be shy about doing that either. So thanks again, once again, to our panelists. As I said, a little bit of a give you an insight of how these platforms work. It's very rude, our platform. I think whenever I stop end, it shuts the panel off, so we don't all go to a green room where I can say thank you very much and we can debrief. So when I end it, it will be over with. So as I said, thank you very much to all our panelists. Thank you very much for putting the time in, and thank you to Jon. You put a lot of work into helping bringing all of us together so we could have this very rich session to yourself and the team at Springpod. So thank you all. Hopefully talk to you all soon and see you all soon.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.